Welcome to the Thyroidless Life podcast with me, Dr. Rebecca Warren. This podcast is for you if you've been diagnosed with a thyroid disorder, think you might have a thyroid disorder, or are healing after thyroidectomy. I'm doing this podcast because of my own personal health journey of being diagnosed with thyroid cancer, getting my thyroid cut out, getting high-dose radiation, and being left with no answers when my health started to deteriorate quickly. It wasn't until I drew a line in the sand that my health transformed, and now I've dedicated my life to sharing this information so others don't have to go down that same path. My hope is that you never feel alone on your health journey and that you understand how incredible your body is, that it's not working against you, it's working with you, and it wants to be well. All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about perimenopause and menopause. And I think this is such an important conversation to have. Now, when I talk about perimenopause and menopause, I'm also talking about in regards to thyroid hormones and especially cortisol, your adrenal hormones. And the reason why, and your brain and your nervous system, this is going to be always all connected. I always talk about these four things together because they're interconnected, and you're going to see how, especially when it comes to menopause and perimenopause. But the reason why, let me take a second here. I have shared over and over again how frustrated I am and really how angry it makes me how women are treated within our medical system. And there is gender bias in research. There's gender bias in medicine. And, a few years ago, I came across an article. Let me give you an example, right? This article, it talked about that as a woman, if you go into your doctor's office and you say you have pain, you are twice as likely to leave with an antidepressant than if a man came in and said he had pain. Like, that's disgusting. I mean, the idea is that you are twice as likely to be treated as if it's all in your head and that it's actually not that bad. I mean, and God forbid the pain is related to some type of female issue. We see that too. Like if a woman is having like heavy bleeding, painful bleeding, instead of addressing like how this is caused, you have two options. Either you're on birth control, which completely, shuts down your natural, cycle of hormones or release of hormones, or get a hysterectomy. I mean, the fact that we are just treating women that are suffering through by cutting out their uterus and their ovaries. I mean, that right there should tell you a lot about how the medical system views women and women's bodies. Now, let me go ahead and tell you this. I have worked with women that have had very heavy, very painful periods. I mean, listen, if that was you and you had a hysterectomy because of that, listen, I understand. If you don't have answers and you're suffering through, I've had women that would continuously bleed for weeks at a time. If that's you and you have no other answer but to cut it out, understandably, but it still doesn't make it okay that this is the medical system's approach to helping women with hormone issues. Either birth control or hysterectomy, there has to be more, right? And so when we're talking about menopause and perimenopause, one thing that's I think it's something very important to note is a lot of what we've come to think about menopause or view as being a normal part of menopause is not, okay? What that means is that women are being treated pretty much the same when it comes to these types of issues. And it's common. It's common, more and more common, that women are having estrogen dominance issues, low progesterone. And so women are having these common issues. They're being primarily within the medical system treated the same. And so if you have enough women treated the same way with these symptoms, it becomes so common that now it's viewed as normal, meaning you're having hot flashes, weight loss resistance, starting to feel more anxious, maybe feeling more depressed. And then you get with your girlfriends and you guys are sitting around and they're all experiencing the same things. And so you guys sit around and look at each other and say, okay, so this is what menopause is. When no, it's enough women with poor, support and not really being taught about hormones or really being approached about it in the right way. Now you guys all have the same issues. Now it's all normal. And it's not. It's not normal. Let's talk about what menopause is. Menopause is a new season. Listen, you wouldn't look at a young girl going through puberty and saying like, oh my gosh, she's going through puberty. That sucks. No, like it is like menopause is like puberty, but in reverse, right? It's this new transition, it's this new season of your life, not just when it comes to your period, but your body, your brain, even like your life, and like your emotional life, your physical life. It is a new transition, a new season. It is not meant to be something that you just suffer through. The reason why we suffer through, again, is because unaddressed issues as we're transitioning into menopause and perimenopause. And I'll explain that here in a second. So I tell that to women through the years that have come in to work with me that want to work on just feeling better in menopause and perimenopause. I'm like, listen, I want this to be a beautiful new season for you. I want you to have a healthy sex life. I want you to feel energized. I want you to feel good. I want you to be able to rest at night, not have hot flashes, decreasing your hot flashes. And they're like, usually at the beginning, they're shocked. They're like, yeah, I would like that too. And over time, we see those things happen. We see things improve when we take a step back and realize being a woman is not a disease process. Birth is not a disease process. Postpartum is not a disease process. Like our menstrual cycle is not a disease process. All of these symptoms that show up in all these different seasons of our life is our body, our intelligent, wonderfully, perfectly made bodies telling us that something is wrong, right? Our body wants to heal and wants to balance and wants to be well. Let's look at these symptoms and listen to what it's trying to tell us. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. Some things to clarify. If you're wondering, like, am I menopause? Am I in perimenopause? So you're in perimenopause as you're transitioning in, like, as you're going from your ovaries making, predominant source of sex hormones to switching to your adrenals. That's important. Listen to me. You don't go from like just not making sex hormones, just not. You go from making it, all this amount of sex hormones through your ovaries to now making the amount you need in menopause through your adrenals. That's a really important thing for you to understand. I'll touch on that here in a second. Okay, so perimenopause can be this season where now your periods are kind of becoming irregular. You might have one every 3 months, one every 6 months. The idea is that you're still in perimenopause until you've had 12 consecutive months of no menstrual cycle, like no period, right? So you can go 8 months, and then if you have a period, you're still in perimenopause. Okay, that's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is that as you're transitioning into, through that perimenopausal into menopause, I like to explain it as you're having a kiddie roller coaster of estrogen release. Okay. Some days you're releasing more, some days you're releasing less. Like it's just, you're not just going one day you're making, estrogen, these sex hormones, and the next day you're not making any. It's this kind of ebb and flow one day to the next of how much estrogen you're actually making. Like 67, like late 60s. And she came in to see me for like menopause symptoms. And I'm asking her questions about her menstrual cycle when she was in her 30s. And she sat there and she was like, what does this have to do? Like, why do we have to go to the past? Like, why can't we talk about what's going on here? And I had to sit back and like show her how we ended up where we're at with her hormones and her symptoms because of the hormone issues she had decades before. Okay. So going back to this adrenals thing, we have a lot of women, a lot of you guys that are rushing through life. And I was first introduced to kind of this by Dr. Mindy is the rushing woman. And when she first introduced it to me, I was like, you know what? Holy crap. Like, yes, 99% of the women I work with are doing this. Is this, we go and we go when we go. We tend to put ourselves last. We are running on fumes, whether it's for work, with our family, seasons in our life. I see women that are not eating enough calories. They're just going. They're pushing themselves. They're taking care of others. They are showing up for others. And they're like dead last. They're just going, right? And, when we're looking at women, and then add on to that, take a second here, like add on to that, when we have sex hormone issues, thyroid hormone issues, HPA dysregulation, cortisol issues, and we're not given the proper guidance. So not only are we rushing and we're going and we're achieving, but then we also have these hormone issues that are downplayed as if they're not that big of a deal, as if sex hormones are only for baby making hormones and they are not affecting our heart, our brain, our whole entire wellness. It's pretty much treated as whatever, and we're rushing. We're depleted. We are depleted. We're exhausted internally, but we keep going. And what is most affected by this is our hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It's the signaling. It's how much cortisol we have that's being made, that's being utilized at the tissue. I see women over and over again running on fumes. They are running on either high cortisol or low cortisol. They're just going. And this is what I've had to say through the years. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should be doing it. Okay? How many conversations I've had through the years of just because you can doesn't mean you should. And we go and we go and we go. We cause all this dysregulation within our hypothalamus pituitary adrenals. We manage, we deal. Some of us need, hysterectomies. Some of you guys are in birth control. Some of you guys are just dealing with it. But then when you get to menopause and the adrenals are now not just, not just responsible for different hormones, including cortisol, but now you're dependent on this signaling system, your adrenals, to supply your sex hormones. After decades of causing all this dysregulation. So now we have women going into menopause with the adrenals and cortisol all wonky. That's the medical term, wonky. All wonky, affecting your sex hormones, affecting cortisol, affecting your overall ability to adapt. And that's what's really important. Let's talk about the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal. The purpose of this system is to help us adapt. Your ability to adapt is your ability to be healthy and well. When you stopped adapting, when you are not able to adapt to stressors, you have disease and breaking down of the body. You have to be able to adapt. That is what it means to be well. Meaning if you're exposed to a virus, being able to adapt appropriately to that virus. If you're exposed to mold, if you're exposed to stressors like toxins or surgery or, an argument, a deadline, like your ability to adapt to that stress is connected with your ability to be well. So the hypothalamus is our this master control center at all times, all day, every day. It's determining if we're safe or we're not safe. It's determining what type of internal and external stressors. Now, stress can be, I love this in chiropractic, it's thoughts, trauma, toxins, but that's exactly right. Like stress it can be a chemical, it can be a physical, it can be emotional. Stress is stress. And our body's learning how at every moment, like how do we need to adapt? Are we good? Are we calm? Are we, in the safe place? Then we can go into parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, and heal. If we are under these big stressors that our body needs to adapt to, then we're going to go into sympathetic, fight or flight or freeze, right? That's what's going on all the time. So I always give this example. If we lived in ancestral days, right? If we were out hunting or picking berries, whatever, and we hear a twig break behind us and we think it's like a cougar or a bear or something, we immediately, without even fully processing it, our body senses danger. And in the presence of that danger, our body changes. The signaling is it's go time. And when it's go time, sympathetic, which is fight or flight, right? Or freeze. Hopefully you don't freeze if there's a cougar there, but that is a reaction. But our body's going to say, what do I need to shut down right now that's not important for survival? What do I need to rev up, right? So for example, if I'm under the stressor of this cougar coming after me, am I concerned about digesting the lunch I just had, or am I concerned with getting enough blood to my legs to run, right? What is priority? There's a hierarchy of priority here, right? What's more important? And no doctor would look at you in this type of stress and be like, oh, your digestive system's funky. It is dysregulated. There's something going on here. No, like it makes sense that if I don't need that for survival, my body's going to focus on other areas, right? So your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your vision changes, your thyroid shuts down, all these things like your sex hormones are affected depending on how long, this cougar's coming after you or how long you're being hunted. The overall idea is that when you have this stressor, you want to survive. You want to address that stressor, and that's top priority. So the goal is, you know what? You need to get away from that cougar. I don't know if cougars can climb, but let's say they can't. So you climb up a tree and now you're safe. Cougar's looking for you, cougar leaves. The stressor has been addressed. The stressor is gone. The body senses that. Hypothalamus talks to the pituitary. Pituitary affects, it communicates with all types of hormones in your body, not just your thyroid, not just your sex hormones, not just your adrenals, right? It communicates with all these hormones in your body. And now your body's like, okay, now we can repair from that whole stressful situation. And now we're in rest, digest, heal. Now your thyroid's functioning. Now your gut's functioning. All right. Sympathetic, parasympathetic. But what I'm finding is that there's so many of you women that are, you might be in your car listening to this, sitting at home listening to this. I don't know where you're at, but you're sitting there. You're safe. You've got a roof over your head. You're in a car, but your body is signaling, it's responding internally as if you have 4 different cougars hunting you down, but you don't. It's these stressors. And, in the past, I've had women say, well, I'm about to retire and I'm about to do this. And I'm not just talking about like work stress and family stress, because the truth is the goal is not to live in a bubble. You cannot live stress-free. It is physically impossible. And if as human beings, we weren't able to adapt to stressors that we encounter, we would be dead. Like as humans, we were meant to adapt to stress. But the problem is we're bombarded by so much, especially when it comes to health, especially when it comes to our hormones. That should not be an added stressor, right? And I explain this to women is like, listen, my job is not to take away the family stress or this other stress, you work stress, whatever it may be. My job is to remove the stressors that we can work on when it comes to your health, when it comes to your nutrition and toxins. Like we're going to eliminate these big stressors so that your body can adapt appropriately to the stressors you have to deal with on a daily basis. And I want to add another little example here, just as a reminder. When it comes to stress, like thoughts, it can be physical trauma, it can be toxins. Again, thoughts, trauma, toxins, those 3 T's. But stress is stress, right? I want to give this example. Again, a good reminder is, remember when you were in grade school and like you had to give a talk in front of the class or on a stage, and before going on, the mere thought, just the thought of doing it, what did it do to you physically? You weren't even doing it. You just thought about it and it created a visceral physical reaction. You had you feel like you got to go pee or poop, or you got butterflies in your stomach. You start sweating. That's how powerful our mind is. That's how powerful the things that we're exposed to can have. Like, even if it's not a real physical stressor, it can still cause a real physical change within the body. So that's important to understand, because if we have these hormone stressors, gut stressors, we have these little things that are not being addressed, these symptoms that maybe you've been able to manage, or you just push through, or you're taking something for, when now you're kind of going into this season where you're very, very dependent on these adrenals. That is why. And I see it get better over and over and over again when we start addressing the stressors, the causes of dysregulation. Because once you start moving those stressors, the body heals itself. And I explain this all the time. I do not treat you. I do not treat disease. That is not my job. That is not my goal. what I do is I identify these stresses that have been not identified or ignored. I identify the biggest stressors. We address those stressors, we remove those stressors, and then we see how the body responds. Things get better, great. Now all that has gotten better. What doesn't get better, then we address that next stressor, right? My job is to remove interference so that the body can heal itself. That's it, right? So going back to what then can happen in menopause, because I get a lot of questions as well about hormone replacement therapy and bioidentical hormones. And I think, especially depending on how severe your hormone issue is, bioidentical can be really helpful, especially with how you feel and how the body's functioning. But let me go ahead and tell you this, because I've seen this over and over again. I do Dutch testing, which is just amazing. Like every time I geek out on it, the testing is so thorough. It has been long overdue for women. It's what I use for my hormone testing. It's just incredible, incredible. I'll put a link in the show notes. But I've had women on bioidentical, and maybe it gets rid of their hot flashes, but when we do cortisol testing and when we're looking at, HPA regulation, it's all dysregulated. I mean, we're having diurnal patterns of cortisol that's a mess. We either see too high cortisol, too little cortisol. So the same thing with thyroid hormones. If you have a thyroid, it's different. If you don't have a thyroid, is the same thing. Like thyroid hormones and bioidentical hormones is you're putting in the end product, right? We're not really addressing like, how did we get here? Why is this so dysregulated? Why is your DHEA so low? Or why is your testosterone low? Like, why is your estrogen? What's going on with progesterone? Why is your estrogen too high? All these questions. What we end up doing with bioidentical is we're putting in the end product, which when you are in a pit, a hole of hormone, just, mess, that can be life-changing. And that's understandable. But it's not going to correct the problem for why you got there. And it's not going to correct dysregulation within that HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. That still needs help and support. Even if you're on bioidentical and your hot flashes have gotten better. I've had women that were able to get off of bioidentical and feel fantastic by regulating that dysregulation that was happening there. So I want to address that because not only have I seen that, but I've also seen women that have difficulties detoxing, aka eliminating, not like detoxing, like your body, we have these natural detox pathways within our liver and our gut that helps keeps hormones in check, especially estrogen. And I've seen women that have like high estrogen in circulation, high 4-OH metabolites, where they're going to cause these hot flashes and maybe vaginal dry, depending on like if there's too much of this or too much or too little. They have this issue with elimination. And the thing that concerns me is that like if we're not eliminating, if we're not doing this efficiently, then putting in all these outside sources of hormones, again, doesn't correct that problem. I've had women that have had some methylation issues, they don't have gallbladder, or they have like bacterial imbalance within their gut. And all that's going to do is recirculate a lot of these estrogen metabolites and continue to cause issues, even if they don't have the symptoms. So it's really important to understand. I know that symptoms are annoying and it's frustrating, and man, can it just wreck your quality of life. But your body is giving you those symptoms for a reason. Those symptoms are there to guide you through what's going on. Like, what is going on here? Not to be ignored. And I've always shared this, and I think it's really interesting that ACOG, American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, says this about, menstruating women and, girls, but it's not put into practice in a lot of clinics across the US, but they released, I think it was around 2015, like that a young girl's menstrual cycle should be treated as a vital sign. These hormones are a vital sign, even in menopause. DHEA is this anti-aging hormone. It affects our blood sugar balance, estrogen, progesterone, our dopamine. It affects our serotonin, our feel-good hormones. It affects our metabolism. It affects our thyroid, our ability to have a healthy heart and a healthy, sharp brain. These sex hormones do. This isn't just about how you feel. This is how you function. This is how you're able to adapt and fight and prevent things. And the fact that it can be ignored without really approaching it as the big deal that it is a problem. And so what's this connection now, just to kind of wrap up today's episode? We talked about the sex hormone and menopause. We have talked about the adrenals, but now with the thyroid hormone. Now, when someone has come in to see me through the years, I've always got to figure out, like, is this the thyroid dysregulation? Is it the primary issue or is it secondary? Like, is it because of, or is it the main thing, right? And I've seen over and over and over again. That's why I've kind of taken this path years ago, going deeper into sex hormones and studies and the connection of all of this. The reason why is because I kept seeing a lot of dysregulation with thyroid hormones because there was a lot of dysregulation with sex hormones. And it's going to be connected, right? Thyroid hormones being suboptimal will affect signaling for sex hormones, meaning very little release of sex hormones. It's a protective mechanism. But if there's a lot of dysregulation within that estrogen and that progesterone, it's going to affect, signaling to the thyroid. It's all going to be interconnected. And again, I explain it as a three-legged stool. The seat is the brain, the nervous system, the signaling. The three legs, we got thyroid hormones, we got sex hormones, we have adrenal hormones. This is for women, right? And when we remove the seat, like nothing, like it's not a stool anymore, right? Like if we do not have the brain nervous system functioning, adapting, everything else is affected, right? Straight down, that stool. But if I remove one of the legs of that stool is toppling over, everything's affected, right? So that's important to understand that there is this connection there. And then it's important to understand like what came first and how is this affected. That even if you're in menopause, what happened to you when you were 40 or 30 or even in your 20s, 15s, teens, I don't know why I said 15s, teens, can still be connected to why you are where you're at right now. And that history, this is the other thing I love about what I do is, as a functional practitioner, this is what sets me apart. I'm looking at the body as a whole. It's comprehensive. You're not this separate system where you have an OBGYN for this, a GI specialist for this, a GP for this. Not only are you all connected, but your health history it's really important, right? Like, what have you been exposed to? What medications, what vaccines, like what have happened throughout your life? What were your menstrual cycles when your puberty started? How about fertility? The fact that actually just remembered I had one of my one-on-one intensive coaching clients that had struggled with infertility for years, like a lot of miscarriages. And I'm still seeing decades later this consistent issue with low progesterone that now is affecting her in a different way. It's all going to be interconnected. And so, the biggest thing I want you to understand from this episode is that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And we are bombarded, yes, by toxins and stressors. There's a lot that we don't have control over, and it can affect us. But the biggest thing to understand is your body is incredible and it's created to heal. It wants to be well. And there's so much more that you can do, right? Like, I don't want you to suffer through any type of season in your life. Just dealing with it, just getting by. That's just crap. I do not, Dr. Nathan, my husband and I, we don't think that way. We don't teach that way. Our clinic, our practice, our virtual, that's not how we approach things. And what's really incredible is we have seen women and men in their 80s doing and feeling ways that are incredible. I will tell you this. There's one woman, she's with us, wellness, but this was a few years back. She was in our brick and mortar, in our clinic, and I remember sitting there And my heart broke because she was like, I think she was like 82 then. And she was like, yeah, my doctor had said, I don't remember if it was a thyroid hormone issue, because a lot of doctors kind of write off low thyroid in my older patients because they're like, you're old, you're meant to be tired. But I'm trying to remember what the doctor specifically said to her, and was like, pretty much like, you're old. Like, kind of like she has these things that are not normal for her. And he was like, well, you're old. This is just what's going to happen. And just kind of wrote her off. But he said it in such a rude way. And I remember her feeling so hurt that he was so just disregarding her quality of life. And what was really cool is we worked with nutrition. We had to up her protein, get her on some thyroid glands to just kind of support nutrients. She started fasting. She felt incredible over time, like just sharing with us like how her energy has changed and how amazing she felt while fasting and all these things. And I just always go back to her sitting in that doctor's office. If she had not heard us, if she did not have us, she would go home and just continue to deteriorate and just get worse because they just disregarded that. Your body is incredible. We just got to find out what it's trying to tell us and work with it, not against it. Guys, let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to be putting a question box on my website. If you want some follow-up questions, you can go on there and submit some. Also, make sure to join my Thyroid Inner Circle community if you want to go deeper on topics of this, get discounts on testings and supplements. And it's really an incredible community that I love and I've put together to pour into women that are on the same health journey as you are. So check it out, thyroidinnercircle.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in to today's Thyroidless Life podcast episode. If you enjoyed today's podcast, can I ask a favor? Could you leave a review? I would love to hear and see how this has been helpful for you on your health journey. And make sure to subscribe. By subscribing, you automatically get these episodes downloaded. And if you haven't checked out my website to get your free Optimal Thyroid Lab ebook, make sure to go and check it out, www.drdrebeccawarren.com. You can find me on social media, Instagram and Facebook at Dr. Rebecca Warren. And for those of you that are healing post-thyroidectomy, I do have a free Facebook group called Healing After Thyroidectomy. So make sure you guys check that out and get plugged in so that we can walk alongside together in your healing journey.